And a lot of this is not the get rich quick scheme. It's just saving your money. And then, as you said in the beginning, having your money start to work for you instead of you trading time for money.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, Ron Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory, walk.
Warning! This is a public service announcement. The Walk in Victory podcast is where we have conversations purposed to evolve lives. You may not want to evolve. Then tune into another bleeping podcast. Everyone else, enjoy the show. And here's our host.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, Ron Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory walks, it was some years ago that I learned in business. We were making money and I just was saving, but my money wasn't making money. And it was sitting in a regular bank, sitting, and eventually it was all depleted. So it was some years after when I said it has to be something to it. Like, how can I, one, have a business that works when I'm not working? Two, have a plan that includes not just saving but investing. We came up with when I was coming up, the most we talked about money was, make sure you put something away for a rainy day, and that was those concepts. So I had to get out of those concepts and those constructs, and not be afraid of investing, not be afraid of taking a hit, and that came with losing, that came with missing the boat, that came with conversations with great people, getting out of old constructs or old mindsets. It came with understanding. Um, when I was in real estate, doing real estate, we were so happy to sell instead of holding, because we wanted that big chunk of money so we can go buy something nice or do something, as opposed to having that money perpetually or residually coming in. So I had to learn all of these concepts and ideas and unlearn the concepts and ideas that I already had within me. So if you're listening, today we're going to be talking about some of these things, but you have to remember that in order to be different, you have to unlearn what you already do. So we have to unlearn some stuff in order to move forward, forge ahead, and do something different. Lane, how are you, sir?
I'm good, good. Well, aloha, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Aloha. Can you tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I'm a real estate syndicator. We put together investment projects, mostly in workforce housing, so apartments. But lately, we've been also getting involved in buying businesses as micro PE. But it didn't always start off with like that. Used to be an engineer, and just like you're saying earlier, just traded time for money because that was the way we were taught to do things, which wasn't necessarily wrong. I think we'll kind of go into that today, but just graduated college in 2007 and started to work for the man. Didn't really care for it. Had a good salary though as an engineer, but then bought a house to live in because that's what we're all blindly taught to do, right? Um, just out of happenstance, I was traveling all over for work and that didn't, had this big place to myself. So I just started to rent it out. This is long before the days of Turo, touring your car out. And that was kind of when I was hooked and I got on this path of passive cash flow and alternative investing.
So when you say passive cash flow, can you give us a definition of what that looks like, or what that would feel like?
Yeah, passive cash flow is, you owning an asset and that asset making money for you without you having to essentially trade time for money like you would at a job or Some people have businesses. That's essentially just a freaking job, right? Whereas, as far as passive cash flow, I think rental real estate is one of the most basic and one of the biggest ones I think people go into because you buy an asset and you essentially rent it out to other people. We all rented apartments, so we all kind of understand, especially in the residential world. But the thing, I think that the rub against passive income, I mean, obviously you want it, and especially from a tax perspective, we can talk more about that. But you need money to play the game, right? There needs to be, if you're thinking about going up a hill, there's that essential push up the hill, yet you need to then have it cruise down the hill slowly. Um, I think a lot of people like, scammy people out there. They always talk about passive cash flow, but they never really talk about that part. So for my first property, I saved up $80,000, and usually, think 20% down payments is what you need on real estate, which is great. A lot compared to a lot of other countries. 20% down payments, or if you're buying, a home to live in, you can get in with probably a little bit less. But and I needed to save 80 grand to buy that first rental property. But once I did, I put a tenant in there. And, if you run your numbers right, you can positively cash flow on that asset, and it can actually pay you money every single month to hold on to it as you're making money through the cash flow, the tax benefits, the mortgage pay down that your tenant's doing for you, and the equity appreciation.
When when you because you're in it now, so you probably have these formulas and ideas and ideologies already mapped out. But when you were sitting down and putting together your base formula, what were some of the things that you learned from the first deal to now where you're doing this in such a way that you're doing it?
Yeah, I mean, something that's real simple and easy that we can kind of do over the podcast format is this thing called the rent to value ratio. So you take the monthly rental price divided by the purchase price. So you take something, when I was starting out, we would buy these $100,000 houses out in the Midwest and South. So I know you're in New York, I'm in Hawaii, and was in Washington. In those places, we typically didn't buy properties that, these are called more primary markets. These are cool places to live, which is why we live there, but not the best places to buy cash flowing real estate. Take California, for example, you'd be lucky to buy a place in the ghetto for 400 grand that
Wow.
would rent for $2,000 a month, maybe 2,500. But if you do the math on that, that rent to value ratio, again, take 2,000 divided by 400,000, that is 0.5%. Again, we're kind of looking for something that's about 1%, as a real quick and dirty way of quick analyzing these properties. And that would be, 0.5% no bueno. That ain't gonna work. So that's kind of the first step right there. I mean, I have a free analyzer. People can go to my website. We used to teach people how to buy little rental properties. Today we focus more on, more on higher net worth investors, guys over $1 million net worth. But that's kind of my passions, is to kind of help people get started as I did when I was in my 20s. And then, I've kind of wrote about each of the steps in the wealth elevator book. And that, I think that's the thing here, is every piece of financial advice you hear out there, it belongs in a certain part of your journey. You may not be there yet, you may be
Mhm.
past there, but I wanted to write a book that broke down the paradigm steps of the wealth building journey, because I think there's a lot of books out there written for guys who don't have money. The Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey, if you've heard of these characters, they have a lot of good financial advice, mostly for the people who are getting started, who are in credit card debt. Myself, I was fortunate to go to college and be raised in a family where we were pretty frugal with our money and able to save money pretty well. We weren't, I mean, I didn't have any wealthy uncles or accredited investor friends, but little did I know I was on that first floor of the wealth elevator, which is to buy little rental properties.
And when we talk about the elevator, and I like the fact that your book and all of the information for those of you who are listening is in the bio. Um, Next to Lane's name is going to be a line. That line you're going to click is going to take you to where you can get the book. Is going to take you to where you can follow him on social media and get into his ecosystems and his thought processes and a website. So all of that is there for you to gain more information. We're here to present you with opportunities, and that's why we're having this conversation. But when you're talking about an elevator, uh, there's a natural progression, right? But some buildings are smaller than others. Right now, I'm at my mom's house. She lives on the 13th floor. So when I was coming up, I lived on the 13th floor. I would always be the last one on the elevator because my friends, some would get off at 7, 2. We would get mad at the guy who would take the elevator to the second floor because he can just walk right up the stairs. You know, but there's different on each level, on each floor. There's different experiences. How did you come up with the what experience is on each floor of your wealth elevator?
Yeah, I mean, in my book, we have like a little chart of all these, I guess, experiences as you call them, or kind of paradigms. Say there's maybe like 4 or 5 of them, so it's not that many. Little did I know, like again, like I said, I was kind of on that first floor getting started. There is the basement level, right, where you're maybe making less than 50 grand a year in credit card debt. A lot of that is just personal finances, keeping a budget. There's a lot of people that teach that stuff. I have my spin on it, but that's just not my specialty. I think, today I'm more on the second floor, on the third floor, teaching people on that level. The first floor of the wealth elevator, you've got good personal finance skills, right? You're not blowing money. You may be able to save 5 grand a year, or 10 grand a year. Not much. I mean, most of the people in our ecosystem on the second and third floor are able to save 50 to $150,000 at least per year. But hey, that's how you get started, right? That's positive traction moving forward. And a lot of this is not the get rich quick scheme. It's just saving your money, and then, as you said in the beginning, having your money start to work for you instead of you trading time for money. And when you do that, at some point, compound interest, that hockey stick is going to catch up with you. I so going back to my story, all this is stuff that I kind of learned on my own.
Hmm.
And you start to realize that very quietly that there's a lot of other investors, accredited investors on this path, but nobody taught this to me. I had to kind of figure it out on my own. So, when in my 20s, I would just buy little rental properties and eventually got up to 11 of them in 2015. You know, these properties, great way to get started. Like I said, I call it adolescence of investing. You kind of go through this first floor of the wealth elevator phase. And, with each property, I maybe had a few $100s of passive cash flow each after all expenses. And again, like we have a full analyzer for people to kind of drill into, how much taxes cost, expenses cost that you run before you buy a property. But that's a few $1,000s a month for a guy in his I think I was my late 20s back then. Wasn't bad. It was like a third paycheck. And but that was kind of where I switched to investing in private placements and syndications as a passive investor. Larger commercial deals, apartments, and being an LP position, you know, was what I realized that a lot of wealthier people were investing in. So they were kind of dumping their little rental properties, going to that second floor of the wealth elevator and getting involved in these more syndication and private placements. And then I start to uncover, what they did for like life insurance, and what we call accredited investor banking. We have a free course in our archives that if people want to more interested in that, they can learn more about that. And then the taxes too was what opened up. And I think you gave a great intro on the passive income. I think the biggest thing about passive income is it's taxed differently than ordinary income. I'm of course not a CPA, right? So put that disclaimer out there. But a lot of these CPAs don't understand how this works. That's why they're still working their freaking day jobs. But as investors, you buy assets such as real estate, and you're think of it, the color of the money that flows off of it is very different color than ordinary income. Ordinary income, you get killed with all these taxes. Whereas passive income, you are able to get around some like self-employment tax, for example. But more importantly, you can use the depreciation from real estate to neutralize your passive income. So don't want to, if you got any follow-up questions, we can go into it. But basically, you're able to write off a little piece of the real estate because technically the real estate degrades over time. So you
Hmm.
can take that paper loss and offset your passive income that you are making. And that essentially is a kind of a sneaky way that wealthy people that I realized. I was like, well, geez, the wealthy people aren't paying taxes on this stuff
Yeah,
legally, right? It's very
yeah,
legal.
yeah.
Yeah.
The system is built. That's what the whole system was built for corporations, well, in real estate LLCs, is so that um, so for what if for those of you listening, for every dollar you make, if you make it through your LLC or your company, you have an opportunity to write off expenses. And one of the expenses that you can write off is the depreciation of your property. Um, but you get the money first instead of when you're working for someone, they take the tax first before you get your money. You have to have a good CPA that understands the rules of engagement. Can't go to H&R Block or Jackson Hewlett talking about I got a company and I need your help. No, you really need to stay on top of this so that you can, if your CPA, if your accountant is good, they show you what it is that you can write off legitimately and how to keep your records straight. So in case you're audited, and also things that you might not even know or consider to be a write-off so that you keep your money back in your pocket. Now you pay your whatever taxes you may have after you deduct those numbers. So if I make a dollar and I say, all right, out of this dollar, I had to do A, B, C, D, and I gave those expenses, I give it to my tax guy. He said, give me a bill back. It's like, oh wow, you know, first you got to pay me, but then the government may even give you a check instead of you owing money if you do these things properly. So, what was the mindset shift for you moving from that first level to the second and third level where you're now coasting at? Moving from 11 single family to commercial buildings. What was the thing that had to shift in you?
Yeah, so at this time, I started to interact with other accredited investors. Like I said
Mm,
earlier, my parents didn't have rental properties, and I didn't have a rich accredited investor uncle. I kind of haphazardly, started to interact with other people, at least cats that owned a bunch of rental properties too. And, it's just see like when you talk with entrepreneurs, finding another entrepreneur out there in the wild is pretty rare, right? That's why I'm in this group entrepreneurs organization. It's like a little, club of entrepreneurs. That's why I don't know what we paid it to get into those groups, but like 10, 20, 30 grand per year, some of these groups. And our spouses are like, why do you guys
yeah.
pay money to hang out with each other? Like, well, once you hang out with us, you know
You all
what's up.
understand. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it's the same thing too with investors, real estate investors or investors. Um, that's why I think like we give a lot of pretty much everything on our I'm talking about today. We have courses that are for free. I don't charge for that type of nonsense like other people do. We monetize off of like we put together events and more curated events for our investors, and that's the magic. People come down to Hawaii and they meet other people, and that was the magic for me about that time when I had 11 rental properties. I started to interact with other investors that also had a bunch of rental properties, and I was like, first off, I'm not lonely anymore, and I don't think I'm crazy. And everybody kind of thought the same way. But then I started to uncover, what is the main curriculum in the wealth elevator, which is kind of a trifecta, a triangle, if you think of it, where it's investing in alternative investments, getting off the beaten path, away from all that Wall Street crap, the traditional investments that they all want you to invest in, where you're just getting killed by all the fees. And it's just crappy investments too. I mean, they're in fact, I don't want to say crappy investments. They're investing in the same things we are, but there's a gazillion middlemen in the
Yeah.
middle taking your money away. That's the big issue. So that's number one. Number two is the taxes that we kind of talked about. If you save money on tax, you don't pay money on taxes because you're doing it legally. I mean, that just augments your returns. And then running your money through an infinite banking life insurance plan configured the right way, not the way that most life insurance agents do it, where there's high commissions, high fees. So what I learned is like there's this trifecta that the wealthy are quietly doing. Very implementable to the average dude out there, but just a little bit counterintuitive than what our parents taught us about investing and how to
Let's talk
manage your money.
let's talk about the life insurance portion, because most people just look at life insurance for death, and they're not looking at it as a part of a portfolio of wealth building. Set up the right way, how can life insurance be a part of your wealth building portfolio?
Yeah, so life insurance, think of it as an asset. It's not like a brick and mortar asset like real estate is, but it's a paper contract. Ideally, you want to buy it from one of the big four life insurance companies out there, right? The highest rating, more secure. So it is actually, I mean, in my opinion, of course, I'm not stating fact here, but in my opinion, I feel like it's a lot more safer than investments and might be even more safer than your bank
Hmm.
that's FDIC insured. A lot of these companies have been around for 100 plus years. Um, they own the biggest buildings in New York City, Guardian, right? They own the building that was in the Friends commercial, every
Yeah.
time. Companies like that. So, I mean, we'll go after, we'll shop all the major companies out there, of course, right? Get the best pricing. But it's configured very differently than life insurance. Life insurance, the primary goal of life insurance is to pay out when you die. We're just simply using the life insurance tag to get a better tax treatment on this stuff and get the asset protection. But what we're basically doing is we're stuffing our life insurance with money, or what we call overfunding it. And then we're taking the money back out as a loan from ourselves and paying the interest back to ourselves and investing in other investments. So that's in the growth years. And that comes back to the floors of the wealth elevator. I think when you're on the second floor of the wealth elevator, your net worth is going over $1 million. The goal there is to get to $3 to $4 million net worth. At that point, you could kind of coax through life at that point, and you may now put money back into your life insurance as opposed to being in growth mode. And my whole mo, people tell me, is we want to somewhat aggressively buy assets, buy rental properties, go into syndication deals till we get to a sort of inflection point of end game, which I would probably say is around $4 or $5 million. Once you get to that point, especially if you have a couple of kids, give a couple $1 million each to them. That's good enough, I think. But from a math perspective, now you're able to live off of that at a measly 4% and at least beat the pace of inflation. And
Hmm.
we kind of touched upon this in the beginning. If you're not turned on to these ideas, your money is going to disappear. I mean, inflation is in an insidious way that people, or that the country, or I mean, all the countries do this, erode away the wealth of those who do not own assets. Unfortunately, it hurts the people who don't invest, which are the lower class, the middle low class, and the middle class some don't even invest these days. It's kind of like gambling, right? Gambling's kind of an insidious tax on the poor, right? Who like to flush money down the toilet.
Yeah,
Um,
I listen to a lot of podcasts, and um, the amount of people, since they've legalized gambling over the phone, is just like something that people just do. Like, and they get angry or upset last night. Case in point, being that you brought it up, one of my favorite basketball players. I'm a Knicks fan. Go Knicks.
Oh,
One of our point guard came up 3 points short, a few points short from
Brunson, right? You're talking
Brunson.
about Brunson.
Yeah, and he's getting death threats. They're calling this that now people have access to you. They can come to your social media, go DM you. Oh, you messed up my parlay. Like, the team won, and the only thing that people can wrap their mind around is I had a chance to make it big, and we take these chances. Especially, I grew up in a poor community, and these poor mindsets that are hard to get around. We consume so much. We spin, and we don't have conversations like we're having right now. We don't. If we're going to go to a club, we go to a game, right? But how important was it in your transformation when you started to have these conversations and get around other people and find out new ideas and really be able to flush your ideas through? Because if you're thinking by yourself, you're the smartest person in the room. You're not that smart. But when you start to talk to other people and they say, no, Lane, do it this way, because this is going to be a way to help you get to your acceleration. This is going to be a way to help you get to your pace. How important was that iron sharpening iron for you?
Yeah, I mean, that was critical. I mean, that was when my portfolio grew. I mean, we started to do larger deals. And I mean, from 2009, when I bought my first property, to 2011, I had 11, or 2015. So it was at 6, 7 years. I had 11 rental properties. And I will point that out. Like, this is like watching grass grow, especially in the beginning. But I was a lot of this is just personal finance again, right? Like, I was able to save 50, 100 grand out of my paycheck every single freaking year.
Wow.
And not many people are able to do that.
No, no.
But when I started to meet other people and started to mastermind around these topics, yeah, after 2016, I mean, we started to syndicate with other people, but the portfolio went over 1 billion at that point. And things just started to hockey stick from there because of the ideas. But this is where I think I don't think you can just skip from point the basement level to the second floor, guys. I just don't think that that's possible. I mean, that's not my story. I just kind of went from one floor to the other. I used the elevator. I didn't use the stairs. That's for sure. But I think there's a process to this whole thing, and you can't cheat the system. You got to go from one to the other. I was lucky, like I said, that you know I don't gamble. I don't, I just save my money, and I was just, I kind of was brainwashed in a good way starting out on the first floor. Um, and that's why I think it's hard for most people out there aren't really brainwashed with those good money skills. Of course, at some point, there's a lot of people that are investors that even into their 40s and 50s, they're maxing out their 401ks and doing things like that, doing it the wrong way, in my opinion. But that's kind of where we try and educate people who are kind of in that money mindset, trying to get to that second floor of the wealth elevator. But, if you're talking, I hear you, man. Like, there's a lot of people out there that, quite frankly, I mean, that's why I think we give away like the systems on the first floor, buying little rental properties. If you guys want to get access to that, just come back to the website and it's free. All those e-courses. But I I mean, I don't really have good advice for people in the basement level. I do, like you said, it's a lot of like mindset stuff, right? I mean, it's a lot of stuff we learned from our parents that help us get started, but at some point, they're not really that useful. Um, but that was this is like just my opinion. I wrote the freaking book, so that's my opinion, and I think they go sequentially in order like that.
When you, how important is it for you to share this information? Like, you're sharing information that again people are charging for. How important for you is the giving part, and how does that play in your wealth transformation? Um,
Yeah, I mean, this stuff changes lives, changed my life,
hmm.
right? If not, I'd still be as an engineer, kind of just doing the same thing over and over again. Um, But I've seen how, I mean, we've got almost like 1,000 plus investors, more than 10,000 people, 15,000 people on the list. I mean, you got like a lot of hardworking families out there that make 300, $400,000 a year to income, and they change something around, they do real estate professional status or their taxes differently. Now one spouse can stay at home with the kids when they're younger,
Hmm.
as opposed to most traditional middle class families or upper middle class. They're both, burning both ends of the candle, right? And they trade quality of life for that leg up on society. And there's an alternative way for them to do things, right? I'm talking to the people who are already, $500,000 net worth and greater, quite crudely. And then my other frustration was like, there's other books written out there, Dave Ramsey, Caesar Orman. I think they're great books for that part of the journey, right? The basement level. And then there's other books out there like the Rich Dad Poor Dad, great mindset book, but doesn't really tell you what the hell to do
No.
and actionable content. And I just felt like that was kind of my place in the kind of the knowledge world. And I think again, like, we do events, and I think that's a cool thing, is to get like-minded people, um, because a lot of people don't talk about their money to friends or family. It's kind of taboo subject, but we kind of make it, accepted. And a lot of people, it comes down to the same values, right? Like, people who save their money, they're more forward thinking, they're delay gratification, a lot of those similar values that cluster around that archetype. And so we provide those that opportunity for them to meet people like that. um and and that was like, for me, is like, knowledge is power. um Especially for those people who have made it, right, over several million dollars net worth. It's more about teaching other people and their kids, of course, these money mindsets. Yeah, you got to go get a good job, make money, you got to make money to society, but you have to at some point turn it to have your own asset pile that makes money for you, so you don't have to work forever. Um, but I think part of it too is, as the metaphor with the wealth elevator, you send the elevator back down for others, and you kind of help people along the path too.
I like the fact that you know your lane, where a lot of people, just because you can you can talk basement conversations, but that's not your lane. That's not who you're targeting. And if you're an entrepreneur, if you're listening to this, you have to know where you are. And you have to be honest with yourself, one, right? Because some people think more highly of themselves than they are. So you have to know where you are. And then wherever you are, don't be ashamed of where you are. Don't be ashamed to acknowledge where you are, but work where you are so that you can work your way out of it.
Yeah. The
Learn the
first step
lesson.
is figuring out where you're
Yeah,
at, like, what is
yeah,
the cattle grade. And in the book, I have like this chart. For the most part, it from a high level, it's just like, well, if you're between these net worth ranges and these net worth ranges, you're in the first floor or the third floor, right? And then you look over, well, these are the things that you do for, investing mindset, and you read the chapter, of course, right? But that's, you may not be there yet. Like, when I was in the first floor of the wealth elevator, I had no concept of the third or penthouse level. But I think it's useful to kind of know what's two steps ahead. um, but the only way you're gonna know is to be around proximity to these people. And even when I was first buying rental properties, I had no accredited investors around me. You don't know who these people are. They're keeping it to their self, right? If you got money, you're not telling everybody. It's
yeah,
stealth wealth out there.
yeah.
But once you step into those circles, when you yourself have the key to the club, that's when these people pop up. But unfortunately, like, I know how it is. If you're in the basement level on the first floor, you just don't have access to these people or these ideas unless you pick up the book.
Yeah. Well, I thank you. I have two more questions for you. Number one, when you moved from the rental properties, single family, two family houses, whatever, to commercial, the deals got bigger. What was some of the mindset shifts that you had to? Was there a fear of, wow, this is a bigger deal? The numbers are greater. Did you have to play around mentally with that?
Well, in those types of arrangements, you take out a piece of the larger pie. right? So, in a way, you're getting more diversification that way, and that's
Mm,
what opens up with that, right? You're not no longer having to invest in your backyard or wherever you're buying rental properties, which is not diversification by any
that's
speak of the imagination.
right.
And now you're also having to trust other people. I mean, the way these deals are put together, if you think of it like an airplane, in the cockpit you have the general partners. These are the guys who, should be their full-time day job to run these deals and find the deals. So there's a certain aspect of scale, right? Like the bigger operation you have, the better deals you're able to find. And, it's their freaking job, right? Whereas when you're doing it on your own as a little rental property owner, you're just an amateur, right? Buying
Mm,
retail deals, and that's the problem with, when you're buying deals under $5 to $10 million, it's very competitive. All the amateur mom and pop investors are buying that stuff and competing with you. So if that was kind of where you're able to get a little bit above where the crowd is and have professionals do it. Now, not the big institutions to run it, right? That's what like a REIT is. A REIT invests in the same exact stuff that we do, but there's a gazillion middlemen
yeah,
in the middle.
yeah.
And it doesn't have the same tax advantages when you're an equity investor. When you're, and that's the cool thing about this stuff. When going back to the taxes, when you buy a little rental property on your own, you're typically able to deduct the price of the building improvement over 27 long years. So I'll give people some real numbers. Like I think the first property I bought was $350,000 in
Mhm,
Seattle. The majority of well, maybe about half of it was the building improvement, which you divide it by 27 and you take the deduction over 27 years. So I think it was like 5, 6 grand per year. So if it made 5, 6 grand. That paper loss would negate that. Again, that's kind of like the tax-free thing.
mhm,
The cool thing with these larger syndicated deals is you can pay for what's called a cost segregation. Basically, like a fancy CPA document that, costs maybe 4 or 5 grand. Kind of expensive if you're just dealing with a little dinky rental property, right? But on a $20 million asset, that's nothing.
mm, yeah,
But you're able to, do a much more aggressive than that 27-year long um, straight line depreciation. So therefore, you're able to extract out way, way more depreciation that maybe you can use to offset other passive income you have in your portfolio. So, these are kind of the concepts of like, even a lot of like CPAs don't really get the stuff, right? Um, all legally, right? I
yeah,
mean, the assets are all depreciating, and this is kind of where, it's all legal. But if it's new to you, it is kind of really technical, but it's kind of simple if you think about it, right?
yeah, yeah, because it's there, and you're the type where you go to the CPA, be like, "No, no, I need you to do it like this."
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, well, like you said earlier, if you need a decent CPA, right? Although I would probably say maybe only 20% of the CPAs out there get this stuff. If people need a referral, just reach out. I can connect you with the folks I personally use, which has kind of changed over the years. But I think, yeah, don't go to the normal guys, right? Like
yeah,
you said earlier.
yeah, you dare to be different. What books have impacted you over the course of your career? It could be fiction and nonfiction that you would say recommend to others, and then we're gonna plug your book one more time, and that's it.
All the basic ones that you hear, the 4-hour work week, just because it makes you think a little bit differently. Um, and then the millionaire real estate investor, a lot of basics of, where to buy, what markets to buy in. We don't buy properties in the nicest areas, best school districts. The numbers aren't going to work there, guys. Ain't going to
Mm,
work. Let's say we don't go to like the worst areas. We're not slumlords, but we find that there's a nice little sweet spot in the middle in these more secondary and tertiary markets. So, primary markets again are the sexy places to live, like where you're at, where I'm at in Hawaii, California. We don't really buy properties in these areas. We buy properties in red states, because we're the landlords. We like the landlord laws on our side, but also like these more secondary markets, like a Dallas, like a Houston,
mm,
um,
mm.
less sexy places like that.
People still living there.
Yeah, and there's economic growth,
That's
but,
like, yeah,
I think part of the reason with the primary markets is you just have people with too much damn money or international money just bidding up prices there. It just
yeah,
doesn't make sense. Great place to live, don't get me wrong,
yeah,
but
yeah.
not the best for cash flow investments.
Well, there you have it, everybody. I told you we have conversations that help you evolve, and we sit you at the feet of the masters. Um, the book, get it right now. Go to the website. You see all of the giveaways. You can transform your life by the information that you're gaining, right? But then you have to take the steps. So just having the information and having the conversation won't put you in the position of victory. We want you to walk in victory. So you have to change your mindset, got to read some stuff, got to do the work, got to put the time in, and stop making excuses. Don't walk with your head down. Don't walk with your arms folded. We together walk in victory. We don't ask you for cash apps, Venmos, or anything like that. We do lead with value. So we ask that you hit like and subscribe. Your likes, your subscriptions help these conversations get heard so that other people can get the same information that you're getting. Let's not be selfish. Enjoy the rest of your day. Peace.